So, I knew I wanted to make some type of best comic of the decade video, but I didn't know what the parameters should be. Should it be the best ongoing series, best story arc, or best single issue? I eventually settled on best single issue. I figured that I'd make everything a bit easier. As much as people complain about modern day comics, there were still a bunch of great comic books that were released this past decade. Now, let's take a look back at what this decade had to offer in terms of comics. You had Matt Fraction's redefining run on Hawkeye with David Aja during Marvel Now, a great book that really captured who Clint Barton is and set up a blueprint for how writers will write Clint Barton from now on. Scott Snyder cemented himself as my favorite Batman writer of all time. He wrote some amazing books. His New 52 run from Court of Owls to Endgame was fantastic, but my favorite Batman book from Snyder, and well, any writer, is still Black Mirror. Such a fantastic mystery thriller starring Dick Grayson as Batman and making James Gordon Jr. one of the most interesting characters in the Batman mythos. Max Landis gave us a new must-read Superman story with American Alien, a great modernization of Clark's origin while still maintaining the core of who Superman is. Jeff Lemire's Black Hammer was a real treat. The Black Hammer universe is a deconstruction and love letter to superhero comics all wrapped up in an interesting mystery. Heck, Doomsday Clock did the unimaginable by giving us a sequel to Watchmen that actually lived up to the original. Needless to say, it has been a good decade for comics. But what is the best single issue of the decade? Is it Detective Comics 880, where Dick Grayson as Batman confronts Joker and finds out that Joker isn't the one that's been messing with the Gordons, but it has in fact been James Gordon Jr. the whole time? What about Titans Rebirth number 5, where Abracadabra sets up all the Titans to be executed at different parts of the country, so Wally West has to go 7,000 miles in 6.25 seconds, and he does it. Then there's Hawkeye issue 19, where Clint and his brother Barney have to recover from the beating they took last issue that resulted in Barney being paralyzed and Clint being completely deafened. You have Superman American Alien number 5, where we have that fantastic first meeting between Superman and Lex after Superman defeats Parasite. Now, all those issues are great, but when thinking of my favorite comic of the decade, there was one that stood out from the rest, a comic that I kept thinking about anytime I would try to figure out my favorite comic of the decade, and that comic is Superman Rebirth issue number 7, written by Peter Tomasi and Patrick Gleason, with art by George Jimenez. This issue is just a day in the life of the Kents, or I guess the Smiths, since that's where they were at this point in Superman Rebirth before they fully went into being the Kents. Anyways, it's not the conclusion to some epic storyline or anything like that. This issue opens up with Superman doing Superman things. He helped fix some solar panels for an astronaut, then he goes and helps various members of the Justice League like Aquaman, Flash, Wonder Woman, and Batman. Then he goes home to his family. Lois starts talking about how tonight is the last night of the Hamilton County Fair, and says her and John will go since Clark will obviously be too busy being Superman. Clark quickly tells Lois he's going to take the day off to go to the fair with his family and that he won't be doing any Superman work. Lois doubts him considering it's Clark. He can't not help people. From here, we get family time at the fair with some great character moments. One of my favorite lines is when John is talking to Clark saying, "Can we play all the games and win every one?" Which is exactly what a 10-year-old kid with superpowers would say. This family fun day gets a bit more interesting when Clark notices some shady figures that are looking to rob the place. The fair is packed and only accepts cash admissions, so it's an easy hit for these thugs, or so they thought. Lois and John want to ride the roller coaster to get the perfect view of the fireworks. Clark claims he's becoming lactose intolerant and needs to use the bathroom, but he obviously used that as an excuse to go take care of those thugs. Lois and John think Clark is going to miss the last ride in the roller coaster, but he makes it back just in time, which makes John overjoyed. We get a great moment here where Lois is suspicious of Clark and starts to question him to see if he went and did some superheroing, but Clark claims he didn't. Then we hear the people in the ticket booth. They left their intercom on and they start talking, the ticket people for the roller coaster, and they talk about how the place almost got robbed, but then some medieval cape-wearing superhero with heat vision melted the thieves' guns and tied them up for the police. George Jimenez does a fantastic job here of capturing Clark and Lois's facial expressions during this unveiling of what Clark did. And then the issue ends with Lois exclaiming that she knew it while John and Clark go up, and away at the top of the roller coaster. I just love this issue. Tomasi and Gleason nail the Kent family, and I can't help but have a huge smile on my face while reading this book. And that's why I chose it as my favorite single issue of the decade. It nails my favorite character and his family, as well as telling a fun story with beautiful art from Jimenez. And this book has only gotten better with age. If you have not read this issue, I highly recommend that you check it out. Now, obviously, it's hard to go through every single comic that I read this past decade, so there were probably some that I missed that maybe I like better than Superman Rebirth issue number 7. But when thinking back, that was the issue that kept popping into my head when I was like, what was the issue I loved the most this past decade? And that was it, Superman Rebirth issue number 7. It just captured everything I loved about Superman during Rebirth. It was so great and such a fun issue. And again, it wasn't part of some big, huge storyline or anything like that. It wasn't some huge unveiling. It was just another day in the life of the Kents, and it really showed why I love these characters. But yeah, there were a ton of great issues this past decade, like for instance the end of All-Star Western. That was a fantastic issue and capped off Jonah Hex's journey so well in that whole run from Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray. That was something I wanted to mention. And then some of the issues that I mentioned earlier. There's just so many great comics, and man, it's hard not to mention Doomsday Clock as well. There were a lot of great books there that could have easily been comic of the decade with what Doomsday Clock did, but in the end, Superman Rebirth issue number 7, I just loved it so much, and I want to hear from you guys in the comments below. What was your favorite comic book of the decade? Single issue. It doesn't have to be a one-shot or anything like that. It can be part of a larger storyline. Just that's what I want to know, is when you guys look back at this past decade, what was the one issue that really stuck with you, the one that you kept thinking of that's like, yeah, that's definitely my favorite of the decade? I really want to hear from you guys in the comments down below, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys later.